Get it media.
So we've got the Canon 600D here, and we're going to go through some controls. If you're doing movies, you want to set it to movie mode, so you must make sure that this little camera icon is in the correct place. So you turn that to movie mode. Obviously turning it on, switch this across here, and it comes on. If you've got screen open, it should open up your screen options there. When you want to record, you press the record button just here, so you push that in. In order to get this info bar up, you just go to this info option here, and that will change, that will bring on the info, and press it a couple of times and it gets your histogram here, or your info down here, and your settings across the bottom there. Okay, so I'll just press info a couple of times to get those things up. Now the next thing is to set your ISO, aperture and shutter speed all across the bottom of your screen. And in order to do that, you come over to here, here's the ISO button, you press there, the wheel at the front, I turn this wheel, so as I'm turning that wheel, that will change the shutter speed. In order to change the aperture, you press the AV button and the wheel at the same time. So the aperture should be changing now, and you can see the screen getting darker. Just turn that away from the light. And getting brighter as we get lower. Okay, and if I'm pressing the ISO button now, it comes up with this screen. And I wouldn't suggest going above 400 when you're filming, so your options are 100, 200 and 400. You can, it just makes your images a little bit more noisy and grainy. Your shutter speed should be set to double your frame rate. We've got a frame rate of 25 frames per second. In order to change your settings, so I've got 1920 by 1080 and I've got 25 frames per second. Let's say you want to change the frame rate, you would go into your menu options, just there, press menu, and to navigate the top here, you go to your little wheel over here, and you move your wheel over, and you can see I've now got this option of record size, and I can press the set button here. Okay, so the set button just there in the middle, and I can change the record options with the wheel again, go across here. It's very useful to be able to change the frame rate because then when you put it into slow motion, if you've got any really action sequences that you want to put into slow motion, it can look really good at 50 frames per second. But normally you'll want to be on 25 frames per second at 1920 by 1080. As you can see up there, that's normal HD. Okay, in order to get the focus right, so I've got my focus ring here, and that's the same for most lenses. In order to get my focus right, so I'm moving it, and it's difficult to see on the screen as it is. What you can do, you can go across these little buttons here and press the plus one, and you'll see what happens when I press the plus, it zooms in. I'm going to press it and press it again to zoom in further, and again 3 times to get back to where you are. And that little box there, that white box, that's where it will zoom into. And you can change that white box with these buttons here, those sort of arrow keys. And if I click it, I can move it around with those. So I want to focus on the light, so I'm going to double click this plus sign here, 1 and 2, and then I can get my focus. Okay, so I'm turning the focus like so, and I'm getting it a bit sharper now. And then when I come back out, I know it's in focus. You'll probably want to do that for all your shots. The other option, of course, is to go to your autofocus here. There we go. Okay, that's so the autofocus there, and then by just touching your shutter button at the front there, that will focus it for you. The other thing you'll want to know is image stabilization. If you're moving your camera at all, I would suggest you keep that on. In fact, I'd suggest you keep it on all the time. Okay, that just offers a little bit of stabilization to your shots. And you can always look at a tutorial on Steadicams for more guidance there. Okay, there's a few options when it comes to light. So we've got 50 frames per second for my shutter speed. That's generally what you want. You want it double the frame rate. So if you put the frame rate up to 50 frames per second, you'll want to turn that to 100. Then there's the aperture. Okay, so the lower you go, the more light it lets in. But do bear in mind, if you're zooming in, it changes your aperture and it will get darker, and you won't be able to bring that down as low as you think you could. So at the moment I'm on 50mm. Probably see there, 50mm, and if I bring that down to 18, now if I want to change my aperture by pressing the plus and minus button there, or the AV button and the wheel at the top, change the aperture, I can go a bit lower with my aperture now and let more light in, but I'm overexposing the image slightly. Okay, I can go to 3.5 on this particular lens. And lastly is the ISO. And the lower the ISO, the lower the light. So the higher the ISO, the more light it lets in. But again, don't go over 400 in my opinion, unless you have to. You can go up to 800, but it does make your images that little bit more grainy. So the main thing you want to set is the aperture there. These shouldn't really vary as much. Okay, so let's say I want to go for some nice low-key lighting. Well, obviously this isn't working. It's overexposed. So what we'll need to do, we'll need to change the exposure in the camera. It's currently set to a shutter speed of 50, so that's double our frame rate, which is right. The aperture is 5.0 and the ISO is 400. If we want to go for low-key, we want to let less light in because we're seeing the background in the image and my face is all overexposed. And now it should look a lot more intense, giving it that low-key feel. So what have we done on the camera? The shutter speed is still the same. We want it at 50 because we want to double the frame rate. And the aperture I brought right up to 29. And I've actually brought the ISO down to 200. I prefer to film at 200 because I know there's not going to be any film grain. That way we've let less light in and we've got a low-key look. So there we have it, the basics of the controls for the Canon 600D and settings if you're filming with any DSLR. Hope that helps.